The train's whistle pierced through Montana's dusty air as Clara Whitfield clutched her mother's last letter. Obey him, no matter how cruel he becomes. She'd been sold like cattle to a stranger, expecting brutality from the mysterious rancher who'd bought her sight unseen. But when Luke Harrison's weathered hand touched his hat brim and his deep voice promised, "I'll be kind to you, always," Clara's world tilted. She'd prepared for cruelty, not kindness. Want to know how this mail-order bride found love where she expected only survival? Stay with me until the end, and don't forget to comment your city below. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The wooden platform beneath Clara Whitfield's boots felt like the edge of the world. Steam hissed from the locomotive's belly, shrouding the Willow Creek station in a ghostly veil that matched the fog in her mind. She stood perfectly still, her father's old carpet bag weighing down her right arm, while her left hand pressed against the pocket containing her mother's final letter. The paper had worn soft from her constant touching during the 3-day journey from Boston, each word burned into her memory like a brand. Obey him, no matter how cruel he becomes. Submit, survive, endure. This is a woman's lot, when poverty leaves no other choice. Clara's green eyes, the same shade as the Atlantic on a stormy day, scanned the scattered crowd of cowboys and merchants milling about the platform. Which one owned her now? Which face belonged to Lucas Harrison, the man who had paid her father's debts in exchange for a bride he'd never met? The October wind cut through her thin traveling dress, her best dress, though its blue fabric had faded from too many washings and careful mendings. She'd sold her winter coat 2 weeks ago to buy food for the journey. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford, just like warmth, just like choice. "You, Clara Whitfield?" The voice came from behind her, deep as thunder rolling across the plains. She turned slowly, her spine straight despite the trembling in her knees. The man who stood before her defied every expectation she'd built during those long, sleepless nights on the train. Lucas Harrison, Luke, as she'd later learn he preferred, towered over her 5'4" frame, but it wasn't his height that struck her first. It was his eyes. Blue as winter sky, they held none of the coldness she'd prepared herself to face. Weathered lines carved paths from their corners, evidence of years squinting against the sun, and perhaps, though she dared not hope, of laughter. His brown hair, touched with early silver at the temples, though he couldn't be more than 35, was clean and neatly trimmed beneath a worn but well-cared-for Stetson. Unlike the fancy suits of Boston gentlemen, he wore simple ranch clothes, denim pants, a blue cotton shirt, and leather boots that had seen honest work. When he removed his hat in greeting, the gesture carried more genuine respect than she'd ever received from men in silk cravats. "Mr. Harrison," she managed, dropping into the curtsy her mother had drilled into her since childhood. "I am Clara Whitfield." "Just Luke," he said, and then spoke words that made her wonder if the train journey had addled her mind. "I want to say something straight off, Miss Clara. I know this arrangement. It's not what either of us would have chosen in a perfect world. But I promise you this. I'll be kind to you. Always. That's my word. And my word is my bond." Clara blinked, certain she'd misheard. Men didn't make such promises to women they'd purchased. They made demands, set rules, established dominance. She'd seen it in her own home, where her father's temper had ruled like a tyrant king until drink and debt had finally destroyed him. Thank you," she whispered, because what else could she say? How could she tell this stranger that she'd spent 3 days practicing how not to flinch when he raised his hand? That she'd hidden a small knife in her boot, the only protection she could afford? That his promise of kindness sounded like a fairy tale, beautiful and impossible? "You must be tired," Luke said, reaching for her carpet bag. His movement was slow, telegraphed, as if he sensed her skittishness. "The ranch is about an hour's ride. I brought the wagon. Figured you'd have more luggage." "This is all," Clara admitted, heat rising to her cheeks. One bag to show for 23 years of life. One bag and a mountain of her father's debts that had led her here. "Makes it easier," Luke said simply, without judgment. "Wagon's this way." He led her through the crowd, his presence creating a natural path as people stepped aside. She noticed the nods of respect he received, the way men touched their hat brims and women offered small smiles. This was his territory, his domain, yet he walked beside her rather than ahead, matching his longer stride to hers. The wagon was simple but clean, with a blanket folded on the bench seat. 2 horses stood in the traces, not the flashy thoroughbreds her father had gambled away, but solid, well-fed animals with glossy coats that spoke of good care. "This is Dusty," Luke said, patting the neck of the bay on the left, "and this is Sage." The gray on the right nickered softly at his touch. "They're gentle as lambs. Do you ride?" "I did once," Clara said, remembering the mare she'd loved before poverty had claimed even that joy. Before. Luke nodded as if he understood the weight of that single word. Before. Before the debts. Before the desperation. Before she'd become merchandise in a transaction between men. He helped her onto the wagon seat, his hands careful and brief on her waist, then swung up beside her with an ease that spoke of a lifetime in the saddle. As he took the reins, Clara noticed his hands, strong, calloused from work, but gentle with the horses. "Tell me about the ranch," she said, needing to fill the silence with something other than her thundering heartbeat. "It's called the Double Bar H," Luke began, his voice warming with obvious pride. 3,000 acres of good grazing land, water rights to Willow Creek, about 400 head of cattle currently, though I'm building the herd. I've got 6 regular hands, good men, all of them. There's Maria, too. She helps with the house and cooking. She's teaching me Spanish, and I'm teaching her better English, though, truth be told, she's the quicker student. "You're learning Spanish?" Clara couldn't hide her surprise. The men she'd known in Boston had considered it beneath them to learn anything from servants. "Half my hands are Mexican vaqueros," Luke explained. "Seemed respectful to learn their language if I'm asking them to work my land. Besides, they know cattle like nobody else. I'd be a fool not to learn from them." As they left Willow Creek behind, the landscape opened into vastness Clara had never imagined. The sky stretched impossible and endless, painted in shades of blue she didn't have names for. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks already dusted with early snow, while the grassland rolled like a golden ocean in the wind. "It's beautiful," she breathed, forgetting for a moment to guard her words. "It is," Luke agreed. "Different from Boston, I imagine." "How did you know I was from Boston?" "Your father's letter mentioned it. Also mentioned you were educated, reading, writing, arithmetic. That true?" "Yes," Clara said carefully, unsure if education would be seen as an asset or a threat to his authority. "Good," Luke said firmly. "I've been keeping the ranch books myself, but I'm better with cattle than numbers. Could use help with that, if you're willing." Clara turned to stare at him. "You want me to help with the accounts? If you're interested. No pressure if you'd rather not. Just thought, well, seems a waste not to use a sharp mind when it's available." A sharp mind. Not a pretty face, not a strong back for bearing children, but a sharp mind. Clara felt something crack inside her chest, a tiny fissure in the wall she'd built to protect herself. "I'd like that," she managed. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, Luke occasionally pointing out landmarks, a distinctive rock formation called Devil's Tooth, a grove of cottonwoods that marked the halfway point, a hawk circling lazy patterns against the sky. His commentary was easy, unpressured, giving her space to respond or simply listen. "Can I ask you something?" Clara finally ventured. "Ask away." "Why did you... That is, why arrange for a bride this way? You seem..." She stopped, uncertain how to finish without overstepping. "Seem like I could find a wife the normal way?" Luke supplied with a wry smile. "Maybe. But ranching doesn't leave much time for courting, and the few eligible women in Willow Creek have their pick of men. I'm not much for fancy words or dancing. I know cattle and land and weather. Figured a practical arrangement might suit better than pretending to be something I'm not." "And my father's debts?" Luke's jaw tightened slightly. "Your father wrote to several men out here, from what I understand, offering you to whoever would pay. When I heard about it in town, it didn't sit right. A woman shouldn't be bartered like livestock. So I wrote back, paid what he asked, figured at least I could offer you a decent home, fair treatment." "You paid to save me from someone worse?" Claire's voice came out smaller than intended. "Paid to give us both a chance," Luke corrected. I need a partner, someone to help build something lasting out here. You needed a way out of a bad situation. Maybe we can make something good from it. The word partner echoed in Clara's mind. Not wife, not woman, not possession. Partner. The sun was beginning its descent toward the mountains when Luke turned the wagon down a worn track bordered by wooden fence posts. We're on double-bar land now, he said. House is just over that rise. Clara's first glimpse of her new home came as they crested a small hill. The house wasn't grand, nothing like the Boston mansion she'd walked past but never entered. It was solid, though, built of good timber with a stone foundation and a wide porch that wrapped around two sides. Glass windows, a luxury on the frontier, reflected the golden afternoon light. Smoke rose from the chimney, suggesting warmth within. Beyond the house stood a large barn, several corrals, a bunkhouse for the hands, and various outbuildings. Everything was well maintained, fences straight and true, no signs of the neglect that poverty brought. This was a working ranch, but a prosperous one. It's not fancy, Luke began, but Clara cut him off. It's wonderful, she said, meaning it. After years of watching her family's possessions sold piece by piece, seeing abundance, even modest abundance, felt like stumbling upon treasure. As Luke helped her down from the wagon, the front door burst open and a woman emerged, short, round, with graying black hair wrapped in a bright red scarf. Her brown face creased into a warm smile as she approached, hands already reaching out in welcome. Oh, me some... Poor Finn, finally, the woman exclaimed in accented English. I am Maria. I have been telling Senor Luke for months he needs a wife, and now you are here. Before Clara could respond, Maria had pulled her into an embrace that smelled of cinnamon and fresh bread. The unexpected warmth of it brought tears to Clara's eyes, which she quickly blinked away. Maria's been with the ranch since I bought it 4 years ago, Luke explained. She actually came with the land. The previous owner was her cousin. She knows more about running a household than I ever will. Senor Luke knows cattle, Maria said with a fond but exasperated look at her employer, but he tries to live on coffee and beef jerky when I'm not watching. Now you are here, we civilize him properly, see? Maria, Luke protested, but his eyes held amusement. Come, come, Maria said, taking Clara's arm. You need to see house, see your room, get warm. Senor Luke, you bring bag. As Maria led her toward the house, Clara glanced back to see Luke following with her carpet bag, a bemused expression on his face. He caught her eye and shrugged, as if to say, This is Maria. You might as well get used to it. The interior of the house was a revelation. Clara had expected rough frontier living, sparse furniture, bare walls, perhaps dirt floors. Instead, she found polished wood floors covered with Mexican rugs in vibrant patterns. The furniture was simple but well crafted. The walls held a few landscape paintings, and books, actual books, lined shelves in what Luke called the front room. You read? Clara couldn't help but ask, running her fingers along the spines. Shakespeare, Dickens, even some Jane Austen. When I have time, Luke admitted. Winter evenings get long out here. Maria taught me to appreciate books. She's read more than most university professors, I'd wager. Senor Luke exaggerates, Maria said, but looked pleased. Come, I show you bedroom. The room Maria led her to was at the back of the house, with windows facing the mountains. It contained a bed with an iron frame, a washstand, a wardrobe, and a small writing desk. Everything was clean, and fresh flowers, late-blooming prairie roses, stood in a vase on the desk. This is mine? Clara asked, confused. She'd assumed she would share Luke's room immediately. It was a husband's right, after all. Maria and Luke exchanged glances, and Luke cleared his throat. I thought you should have your own space, at least at first. My room's across the hall. No expectations, Miss Clara. We're strangers yet. Figured we should maybe become friends first. Friends first. The concept was so foreign, so unexpected, that Clara had to sit down on the edge of the bed. In all her preparation for this new life, she'd never imagined kindness, respect, or consideration for her feelings. Thank you, she managed, the words inadequate for the relief flooding through her. Dinner in 1 hour, Maria announced. I make something special for welcome. Senor Luke, you go wash. You smell like horse. I always smell like horse, Luke protested, but he was already heading for the door. I'll leave you to get settled, Miss Clara. Take all the time you need." After they left, Clara sat in the gathering dusk of her new room, her own room, and finally allowed the tears to fall. They weren't tears of sadness or fear, but of a confusing mixture of relief, gratitude, and a dangerous feeling she didn't dare name yet. Hope, perhaps, or something perilously close to it. Dinner was unlike any meal Clara had experienced in years. Maria had prepared what she called a feast of two worlds: American beef stew alongside Mexican rice, fresh tortillas, and a salsa that made Clara's eyes water in the most pleasant way. Luke laughed at her expression, not mockingly, but with genuine warmth, and showed her how to temper the heat with a bit of sour cream. "Maria believes all problems can be solved with enough chili peppers," he explained. "Is not true," Maria protested. "Some problems need tequila too." The easy banter between employer and housekeeper spoke of genuine friendship, not the rigid hierarchy Clara had known. Maria ate with them at the same table, contributing to the conversation as an equal. When Clara commented on how unusual this seemed, Luke looked genuinely puzzled. Why wouldn't she eat with us? She cooked the food. She ought to enjoy it in good company. After dinner, Luke showed Clara his office, a small room off the main hallway where he kept the ranch books. The desk was covered with ledgers, receipts, and correspondence, all in various states of organization. "I warned you I'm no good with this part," he said ruefully. "I can tell you every cow on this ranch by sight, know which bull sired which calf, but making these numbers line up proper is beyond me." Clara opened one of the ledgers, scanning the entries. Luke's handwriting was clear enough, but his system, if it could be called that, was chaotic. Still, she could see the bones of good record-keeping underneath the disorder. "I can work with this," she said. "My father, before his troubles, was a bookkeeper. He taught me his trade, though he never let me practice it publicly." "Well, no one's watching out here except the cattle, and they don't care much for propriety," Luke said. "Work on it whenever you like, no rush." As the evening drew on, exhaustion finally caught up with Clara. The 3 days of travel, the emotional upheaval, the unexpected kindness, it all crashed over her at once. "You should rest," Luke said, noticing her stifled yawn. "Tomorrow I thought I'd show you around the ranch proper, introduce you to the hands, if you're feeling up to it." "I'd like that," Clara said, standing. At the door to the hallway, she paused. "Luke? Mr. Harrison?" "Luke," he corrected gently. "Luke. Why are you being so kind to me? You paid for a wife. You have every right to demand—" Luke stood too, his expression serious. "Miss Clara, I paid to get you out of a bad situation. That doesn't give me rights to anything except the chance to earn your trust. Maybe someday we'll have a real marriage, maybe we won't. Either way, you're safe here. You have my word on that." Clara searched his face for any sign of deception, any hint that this was an elaborate game. She found only sincerity in those blue eyes, and something else, perhaps loneliness that matched her own. "Good night, Luke," she said softly. "Good night, Miss Clara. Welcome home." That night, Clara lay in her own bed, in her own room, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling into sleep. Cattle lowing in the distance, wind through the cottonwoods, the creak of the house adjusting to the cool night air. From across the hall, she could hear Luke's steady footsteps as he prepared for bed, then silence. She pulled out her mother's letter one more time, reading it by moonlight from the window. Obey him, no matter how cruel he becomes. But what if he wasn't cruel? What if kindness wasn't a trap, but a truth? What did a woman do when she'd prepared for battle and was offered peace instead? The next morning came crisp and bright, with frost edging the grass and the mountains standing sharp against a crystalline sky. Clara woke to the smell of coffee and bacon and the sound of voices from the kitchen. She dressed quickly in her second-best dress, one of only 3 she owned, and made her way downstairs. Luke was at the kitchen table, coffee cup in hand, while Maria bustled at the stove. He looked up when she entered, and something in his expression softened. "Morning, Miss Clara. Sleep well?" "Yes, thank you." She accepted the coffee Maria pressed into her hands, wrapping her fingers around the warm ceramic. "You're up early." "Ranch work starts before the sun," Luke said. "But I wanted to wait for you before heading out. Thought you might like to see the operation, meet everyone." After a breakfast of eggs, bacon, and Maria's exceptional biscuits, Luke led Clara out to the barn. The morning air was sharp enough to make her breath visible, and she pulled her shawl tighter. "We'll need to get you some proper ranch clothes," Luke observed. "Those dresses won't last long out here, and they're not warm enough for Montana weather. There's a seamstress in town, or Maria knows how to alter men's clothes to fit. Whatever you prefer." The idea of wearing men's clothes, even altered, would have scandalized Boston society. But Boston society had sold her to pay debts, so perhaps their opinions no longer mattered. The barn was a cathedral of hay and horseflesh, sweet-smelling and warm. Several horses occupied the stalls, and Luke introduced each one as if they were old friends. "This is Buttercup. Don't let the name fool you. She's got spirit. That's Samson, strongest horse in the territory. And this," he stopped at a stall containing a lovely paint mare, "is Lady. Thought she might suit you if you want to take up riding again." "She's beautiful," Clara breathed, extending her hand for the mare to sniff. Lady lipped gently at her fingers, accepting her immediately. "She's yours if you want her," Luke said. "Every rancher's wife needs a good horse." Rancher's wife. The title sat strangely on Clara's shoulders, but not unpleasantly. They were interrupted by the arrival of several men returning from the morning's first tasks. Luke introduced them one by one. Tom, his foreman, a grizzled man in his 50s with kind eyes. Miguel and Carlos, brothers from Sonora who'd been with the ranch 2 years. James, barely out of boyhood but eager to prove himself. Samuel, a freed slave from Texas, who Luke described as the best horseman in Montana. And Pablo, whose skill with rope work was legendary. Each man removed his hat and nodded respectfully to Clara. She saw curiosity in their faces, but no leering, no inappropriate assessment. Whatever Luke had told them about her arrival, it had established clear boundaries. "Ma'am," Tom said, speaking for the group, "welcome to the double bar. Boss says you'll be handling the books. That's a relief to all of us. His numbers make our heads spin." "I tried to explain the accounting system," Luke protested. "You tried to explain your version of an accounting system," Tom corrected with the ease of long friendship, "which changed every time you explained it." The men laughed, and Luke took the ribbing with good humor. This too was different, a boss who could be teased by his employees, who treated them as men rather than tools. Luke spent the morning showing Clara around the ranch. The corrals where they broke horses, the pastures where cattle grazed, the creek that provided year-round water. He explained the rhythm of ranch life, spring calving, summer drives to better pasture, fall roundup and sale, winter survival. "It's hard work," he said honestly, "harder than anything you've known in the city. But it's honest work, and it's building something. Every calf born, every acre improved, every good season, it all adds up to something lasting." Clara found herself caught up in his vision, seeing possibilities she'd never imagined. "What about farmers?" "I've heard there's conflict between ranchers and farmers out here." Luke's expression darkened slightly. "Some places, yes. Farmers want to fence the land, ranchers need open range. But I've been buying my land legal and proper, getting deed and title. Any farmer settles near here, long as they respect my water rights and don't fence my cattle out from the creek, we'll get along fine. World's big enough for both." This pragmatic approach to conflict resolution seemed typical of Luke, firm on his rights but willing to compromise for peace. As they walked back toward the house for lunch, a rider approached at full gallop. Luke tensed, his hand moving instinctively toward the rifle he carried. "Trouble?" Clara asked, alarmed. "Maybe. That's Jim Paulson's boy." The rider, a youth of perhaps 14, pulled up hard, his horse lathered with sweat. "Mr. Harrison, Pa sent me. Roland Keynes moved his herd onto your north pasture. Says the land's his by rights, something about an old Spanish grant. He's got 20 men with him." Luke's face went hard as granite. "Tom!" he shouted, and the foreman appeared as if from nowhere. "Get the boys, armed but not aggressive. We're riding to the north pasture." "Luke?" Clara touched his arm, feeling the tension in his muscles. He looked down at her, and she saw the kind rancher transform into something harder, more dangerous. "Roland Keene's been trying to push me out since I arrived. Seems he decided today's the day to make his move. Get in the house, Clara. Stay with Maria." "Be careful," she said, surprising herself with the genuine concern in her voice. His expression softened fractionally. "Always am." Go on now. Clara watched from the porch as Luke and his men rode out, rifles across their saddles, faces grim. Maria joined her, shotgun in hand. Is this normal? Clara asked. Keen, he is a snake, Maria said. He wants the water, the land. He thinks because Senor Luke is fair, he is weak. He is wrong. The next hours were the longest of Clara's life. She tried to work on the ledgers but couldn't concentrate. Maria baked bread, kneading with unusual violence. Both women started at every sound, every distant noise that might be gunfire. It was near sunset when the men returned. Clara counted quickly. All present, though Tom had a bloody bandage around his arm. Luke swung down from his horse, face drawn with exhaustion and something else, controlled anger. What happened? Clara asked, meeting him at the door. Keen backed down when he saw we wouldn't run, took his cattle and left, but not before Tom took a bullet in the arm. It's not bad, he added quickly, seeing her alarm. Maria, can you tend to it? As Maria bustled Tom inside, muttering Spanish curses about Keen's parentage, Luke slumped onto the porch steps. Clara sat beside him, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. This isn't over, he said quietly. Keen won't give up. He'll come back, probably with more men, maybe with lawyers claiming that Spanish Grant is real. I might have brought you into a war, Clara. That's not what I intended. You didn't bring me into anything, Clara said firmly. I chose to come here. Well, as much as I could choose anything, but I'm here now, and I'm not made of spun glass. What can I do to help? Luke looked at her with surprise and something that might have been admiration. You mean that? I've been useless most of my life, Clara said. Ornamental, as my father put it before he decided I was worth more as currency. I'd like to be useful for once. You're already useful, Luke said. Just having you here, knowing someone else has a stake in this place, it helps. But if you mean it, I could use your help going through the land records, making sure every piece of paper is in order. Keen will try legal means next, and we need to be ready. They worked together late into the night, spreading documents across Luke's desk, creating a chain of ownership that proved beyond doubt that the double bar was legally Luke's. Clara's experience with her father's bookkeeping, her attention to detail, proved invaluable. She found discrepancies Luke had missed, organized documents in a way that told a clear story. You're remarkable, Luke said at one point, watching her work. Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. It's just paperwork. No, it's battle preparation. Different kind of fight than what happened today, but just as important. As the clock struck midnight, Luke insisted she get some rest. At her bedroom door, Clara turned to face him. In the lamplight, she could see the weariness in his eyes, the weight he carried. Luke, that promise you made at the train station about being kind? Yes. You've kept it. Even with everything else, you've kept it. He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face. Easiest promise I ever made, Clara. Good night. The next days fell into a pattern. Clara rose early, helped Maria with breakfast, then worked on the ranch books while Luke handled the outdoor work. Afternoons she spent learning to ride Lady, remembering skills her body had never quite forgotten. Evenings were for gathering, all of them around the big kitchen table, Maria and often Tom joining them, discussing the day's work and tomorrow's plans. It was during one of these dinners, a week after the confrontation with Keen, that Tom brought disturbing news. Keen's in town, spreading stories, he said, saying Luke bought his bride because no decent woman would have him. Saying things about Mrs. Harrison that aren't fit to repeat. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. She'd expected this, in a way. Her unconventional arrival would naturally spawn gossip, but hearing it confirmed still stung. Luke's knuckles went white around his fork. He said, "What?" "Boss, don't," Tom warned. "That's what he wants. You to come after him angry, do something stupid he can use against you." "He's insulting Clara." "Yes," Clara said quietly, and all eyes turned to her. "He's insulting me to get to you, and we won't let him. We're better than that." "Clara." "No, Luke, think about it. What hurts him more? You punching him in the street, giving him ammunition to use against you, or us ignoring him entirely, being successful despite his efforts? The best revenge is a life well lived." Maria clapped. "The Senora is wise. We show them all. We make this ranch so good, so strong that Keen chokes on his own poison. Luke looked at Clara with something approaching awe. "You're not what I expected, Clara Whitfield." "Harrison," she corrected, surprising herself. "Clara Harrison. If I'm going to be insulted, might as well be for the right name." The change in Luke was immediate and profound. His whole face lit up, and he reached across the table to take her hand. "Clara Harrison. I like the sound of that." His hand was warm, calloused, gentle. Clara didn't pull away. That night, as Clara prepared for bed, she heard a soft knock at her door. Luke stood in the hallway, holding something wrapped in cloth. "I've been meaning to give you this," he said, seeming uncharacteristically nervous. "It was my mother's." Clara unwrapped the cloth to find a gold locket on a delicate chain. It was beautiful, but not ostentatious. Exactly the kind of thing she would have chosen herself. "Luke, I can't." "Yes, you can. You're my wife, even if we're taking things slow. My mother would have liked you. She was strong like you, smart like you. Stood up to my father when he was wrong, which was often. She would want you to have this." Clara's eyes burned with unshed tears. "Tell me about her?" Luke smiled softly. "Her name was Elizabeth. She came from Ireland as a girl, worked as a seamstress until she met my father. He was a blacksmith, good with his hands but bad with drink. She held our family together through sheer will sometimes, taught me to read, to think before I acted, to be better than my circumstances. She died when I was 15, but not before making me promise to be the kind of man who deserved a good woman's respect. She sounds wonderful." She was. She would have been thrilled to know I married a woman who could put Roland Keene in his place with words instead of fists. Clara fastened the locket around her neck, the gold warm against her skin. "Thank you, Luke. I'll treasure it." He reached out, fingertips barely brushing the locket where it lay against her throat. "It suits you." The moment stretched between them, fragile and full of possibility. Then Luke stepped back, clearing his throat. "Good night, Clara." "Good night, Luke." As she lay in bed that night, the locket a gentle weight against her chest, Clara realized something had shifted. She was no longer thinking about escape routes or survival strategies. She was thinking about the future, their future. And for the first time in years, that future didn't terrify her. The next test came sooner than expected. 3 days later, Clara was in town with Maria, purchasing supplies, when she encountered Mrs. Wellington, the banker's wife, and Willow Creek's self-appointed social arbiter. "So you're the mail-order bride," Mrs. Wellington said, her tone making it clear this was not a compliment. "How unusual." Clara felt Maria bristle beside her, but she placed a calming hand on the older woman's arm. "I'm Clara Harrison," she said pleasantly. "And you are?" "Mrs. Reginald Wellington. My husband runs the bank. We've been established in Willow Creek for 10 years. "How wonderful for you," Clara said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It must be gratifying to watch the town grow. I understand my husband has contributed significantly to that growth with the Double Bar's success." Mrs. Wellington's lips pursed. "Yes, well, some of us wonder about Mr. Harrison's methods. Buying a wife from a catalog seems so commercial." "Oh, it wasn't a catalog," Clara said conversationally. "It was a direct arrangement, much more personal. Luke saw a woman in need and offered help, expecting nothing in return except companionship. I find that remarkably noble, don't you? So much better than the typical arrangement where women are essentially sold for social standing or wealth. At least Luke was honest about it." Several other women had gathered, sensing drama. Clara recognized the general store owner's wife, the minister's daughter, and others she'd seen but not met. "I hardly think—" Mrs. Wellington began. "Tell me, Mrs. Wellington," Clara interrupted smoothly. "How did you meet your husband? I assume it was a love match?" The woman's face reddened. Everyone in town knew Reginald Wellington had married her for her father's money. "That's different. Is it? At least Luke paid my father directly instead of pretending dowries and marriage settlements or anything other than purchase prices. We're simply more honest about our arrangement. And unlike some marriages I could mention, built on pretense and social climbing, ours is based on mutual respect and genuine affection." "Affection that developed rather quickly," Mrs. Wellington said nastily. "Yes, it's amazing how quickly affection grows when a man treats a woman as an equal rather than an ornament or a broodmare," Claire replied. Luke values my mind as much as my presence. Can your husband say the same? The crowd tittered. Reginald Wellington was known for publicly dismissing his wife's opinions and referring to her as the little woman in patronizing tones. Mrs. Wellington drew herself up huffily. I suppose we can't expect better from someone of your background. My background? Clara laughed. You mean as an educated woman who reads Latin and Greek, who can balance ledgers and discuss Shakespeare? Or did you mean my background as someone who survived poverty with dignity and tact? Either way, I'll take my background over yours any day. At least I know who I am without needing to tear others down to feel important. She turned to the other women. Ladies, I hope to get to know you all better. The Double Bar will be hosting a harvest dinner next month. You're all invited, regardless of what Mrs. Wellington thinks of mail-order brides. As she and Maria left the store, packages in hand, Clara could hear the buzz of conversation behind them. Maria was practically glowing. Señora, you were magnifica. That woman, she is a serpiente, always striking at others. She's unhappy, Clara said. Unhappy people often try to spread their misery. Word of the confrontation reached the ranch before they did. Luke met them at the wagon, concern written on his face. Heard there was some trouble in town. No trouble, Clara said lightly, just establishing some boundaries. Tom, who'd been in town earlier, laughed. Way I heard it, she took on Mrs. Wellington and left her speechless. Half the town's talking about it. Clara? Luke helped her down from the wagon. What exactly did you say? She told him, watching his expression shift from concern to surprise to something that looked like pride. You defended our marriage, he said softly. I defended us, Clara corrected. We're partners, remember? That night after dinner, Luke asked Clara to walk with him. The moon was full, casting silver light across the ranch land. They walked to a small rise that overlooked the valley, the lights of Willow Creek visible in the distance. This is my favorite spot, Luke said, where I come to think, to plan, sometimes just to breathe. It's peaceful, Clara agreed, wrapping her shawl tighter against the cool night air. Clara, I need to ask you something. These weeks since you arrived, have you been happy? Or at least not unhappy? Clara considered the question seriously. I've been surprised. I expected cruelty and found kindness. I expected servitude and found partnership. I expected to endure, and instead, I'm living. Is that enough? It's more than I dreamed possible a month ago. Luke turned to face her fully. I know this isn't the romance from those novels Maria reads. I'm not good with pretty words or grand gestures, but I want you to know you're the best thing that's happened to this ranch. To me. Clara's heart was racing. Luke, I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give, but I want to court you proper, even if we're already married. Take you on rides, bring you flowers, all the things I should have done if we'd met the normal way. I'd like that, Clara whispered. He reached out, slowly enough that she could pull away, and touched her cheek. When she didn't retreat, he leaned down and kissed her forehead, the gesture achingly tender. We'll do this right, he promised, however long it takes. As they walked back to the house, Clara's hand found its way into Luke's. It felt like coming home. The morning after their moonlit conversation brought the first snow of the season, delicate flakes drifting down like promises from heaven. Clara stood at the kitchen window, watching Luke and the men work to bring the cattle closer to the ranch, preparing for what he'd warned might be a harsh winter. The locket at her throat caught the light as she moved, a constant reminder of the trust he'd placed in her. You watch him like he hung the moon, Maria observed, kneading dough for the day's bread. Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. I'm just observing the work. See, and I am just making bread, not planning a feast for the harvest dinner that will show all of Willow Creek what fools they are. Maria's eyes twinkled. Love is not something to be ashamed of, mija. It's been barely a month, Maria. How can it be love? How long does it take to recognize home when you find it? Maria asked simply. Before Clara could answer, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. Through the window, she saw a group of riders approaching, not ranch hands, but well-dressed men from town. Among them rode Reginald Wellington, the banker, and another man Clara didn't recognize, dressed in a black suit despite the weather. Luke met them in the yard, and though Clara couldn't hear the words, she could read the tension in his shoulders. Tom and the other hands materialized seemingly from nowhere, positioning themselves strategically around the yard. "Trouble," Maria said grimly, reaching for the shotgun she kept by the door. Clara didn't wait. She grabbed her shawl and stepped onto the porch, making her presence known. Luke glanced at her, and something in his expression hardened further. "Gentlemen," she heard him say as she drew closer, "what brings you to the double bar?" Wellington spoke with the pompous authority of a man used to having his way. "Mr. Harrison, this is Mr. Edwin Crawford, attorney at law. He represents Mr. Roland Keene in a matter of some delicacy." Crawford, the man in black, produced a sheaf of papers from his saddlebag. "Mr. Harrison, my client has documentation proving prior claim to the northern section of what you call the Double Bar Ranch, specifically the area containing water access to Willow Creek. This Spanish land grant predates your purchase by 50 years. "That's impossible, Sec," Luke said flatly. "I bought this land free and clear from Samuel Morrison 4 years ago. Have the papers to prove it." "Papers can be forged," Crawford said smoothly. "Spanish grants, however, are recorded in the territorial offices. My client is prepared to be generous. He'll allow you to keep the southern portion of your ranch if you cede the northern pastures and water rights immediately." Clara stepped forward before Luke could respond. "Mr. Crawford, is it? I'm Mrs. Harrison. I handle the ranch's legal documentation. May I see these supposed grants?" Crawford looked at her dismissively. "I hardly think a woman who reads Spanish, English, and legal Latin," Clara interrupted. "A woman who spent 3 years helping her father untangle land disputes in Boston. Now, may I see the documents, or shall we discuss this with Judge Porter instead?" The mention of the circuit judge, known for his intolerance of false claims, made Crawford hesitate. He handed over the papers with obvious reluctance. Clara studied them carefully, aware of all eyes upon her. The documents were in Spanish, old and yellowed, seemingly authentic. But her father had taught her well. The devil was always in the details. "Interesting," she said finally. "This grant is dated 1823, correct?" "As you can see," Crawford said smugly, "and it refers to landmarks including the Great Oak by the Triple Fork of the Creek and the Redstone Mountain to the east. Natural landmarks that still exist." Clara smiled. "Mr. Crawford, are you familiar with the earthquake of 1821? The lawyer's expression flickered. "I don't see how that's relevant." "It's entirely relevant. The earthquake changed the course of Willow Creek significantly. The Triple Fork mentioned in this document? It hasn't existed for over 50 years. The creek runs a single channel now, has since before Mr. Morrison homesteaded here. Furthermore, Redstone Mountain to the east? The only redstone formation in this area is to the west. Unless Mr. Keene's Spanish grant refers to land in another territory entirely, this document is either fraudulent or irrelevant." She turned to Wellington. "Mr. Wellington, as banker, you hold the mortgage papers for several properties in the area. You know the current geographical markers. Would you stake your bank's reputation on these landmarks existing as described?" Wellington shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. His bank held the note on Keene's existing property, and fraud would endanger that loan. "I would need to examine the situation more carefully." "Then examine away," Luke said, his voice carrying new authority. "In the meantime, get off my land, and Crawford, tell Keene if he sets foot on Double Bar property again, I'll have him arrested for trespassing and attempted fraud." Crawford's face had gone pale. "You can't prove—" "I can prove the landmarks don't match," Clara said calmly. "I can prove the Spanish provincial governor who supposedly signed this grant had been dead for 2 years at the date shown." "Oh yes, Mr. Crawford. I know my history. Governor Alejandro de la Cruz died in 1821, yet his signature appears on a document dated 1823. Rather careless forgery, really." The lawyer grabbed the papers back, his hands shaking. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is," Luke said quietly. "Tell Keene he's done. One more attempt, legal or otherwise, and I'll bring federal marshals into this. The territory takes a dim view of land fraud." As the men rode away, Wellington lingering just long enough to tip his hat apologetically to Clara, Luke turned to his wife with wonder in his eyes. "How did you know about the governor?" Clara smiled. My father worked a case involving Spanish land grants in California. The same forger, apparently. He always used Governor de la Cruz's signature because it was simple to reproduce. Father caught him then, and it seems Mr. Keene hired the same incompetent criminal. Tom whistled low. Ma'am, you just saved the ranch. We all saved it, Clara corrected. I just knew what to look for. Luke crossed to her in 2 strides, and in front of all his men, pulled her into his arms. Clara Harrison, you're magnificent. She let herself lean into his embrace, feeling the solid strength of him, smelling leather and soap and something uniquely Luke. Around them the hands cheered and Maria wiped tears from her eyes. Just doing my part, Clara murmured against his chest. Partner, Luke said, the word carrying weight and warmth. Full partner in everything. That evening, the ranch celebrated. Maria outdid herself with dinner, the hands brought out a fiddle and harmonica, and even Clara was convinced to dance, Luke's hands sure and gentle as he guided her through the steps. I haven't danced since I was 16, she admitted, laughing as she missed a step. You're doing fine, Luke assured her. Better than fine. You're perfect. The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Clara met his eyes and saw her own feelings reflected there, the growing attraction, the deepening trust, the possibility of something more than either had dared hope. Later, as the celebration wound down and the hands returned to the bunkhouse, Luke asked Clara to sit with him on the porch despite the cold. I want to tell you something, he said, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. About why I really answered your father's letter. Clara waited, sensing this was important. 4 years ago, I was engaged. Her name was Sarah, daughter of a rancher near Cheyenne. Pretty, accomplished, everything a man could want. We courted for 6 months, and I thought we'd build a life together. Clara's chest tightened, but she remained silent. 2 weeks before the wedding, she ran off with a traveling salesman, said ranch life was too hard, too lonely, said I was too rough, too focused on the land instead of her. Luke's voice was steady, but Clara heard old pain underneath. Maybe she was right. I'm not smooth-talking or fancy, but I thought what we had was real. Luke, after that, I focused on building the ranch, figured if I couldn't have love, I'd have land, something that couldn't leave, couldn't lie. Then your father's letter came. He turned to face her fully. Other men might have wanted a pretty face or strong son. I wanted someone who understood that building something takes work. Someone who wouldn't run when winter got hard or cattle got sick. Someone practical, Clara said softly. That's what I thought I wanted. But Clara, you're so much more than practical. You're brilliant and brave and kind. You stand up to bullies and comfort Maria when she misses her family in Mexico. You treat the hands with respect and dignity. You've made this house a home in ways I never could. Clara's eyes burned with tears. You gave me a chance to be myself. Do you know how rare that is? All my life men told me to be quieter, smaller, less. You tell me to be more. Luke reached out, cupping her face gently. I'm falling in love with you, Clara. Not the idea of you, not the convenience of you, you. Luke, Clara's voice broke. I'm falling too. Have been since you kept your promise at the train station. This time when he kissed her, it wasn't on the forehead. His lips met hers with a tenderness that spoke of patience and desire, carefully controlled. Clara had been kissed before. Fumbling attempts by Boston boys who saw her as a prize. This was different. This was communion, conversation, confession, all at once. When they parted, both were breathing unsteadily. Clara, Luke said roughly, I want to do this right. Court you proper, even if we're already married. But God help me, it's getting harder to say goodnight at your door. Clara's cheeks burned, but she met his eyes steadily. What if you didn't have to? Say goodnight at my door, I mean. Luke went very still. Clara, are you sure? There's no rush. I can wait as long as... She silenced him with another kiss, this one bolder, surer. I'm sure. But Luke, let's still take it slow. I want to learn you. Learn us. That night, Clara moved across the hall. Luke's room was larger than hers, dominated by a bed made of pine logs he'd cut himself. The quilts were handmade, gifts from Maria, and the single painting on the wall showed the Double Bar Valley at sunset. "It's not fancy," Luke said nervously. "It's you," Clara replied, and that was everything. They lay together fully clothed at first, learning the shape of each other. Luke's hands were infinitely gentle as he unpinned her hair, letting the dark waves fall around her shoulders. "Beautiful," he murmured, wrapping strands around his fingers. Clara traced the lines of his face, the small scar above his left eyebrow from a horse's hoof, the laugh lines that spoke of joy despite hardship. "How did I get so lucky?" "I'm the lucky one," Luke said. "Clara, I need you to know, if you change your mind any time about any of this—" "I won't," she said firmly. "Luke Harrison, you're stuck with me now." They moved together slowly, carefully, with the patience of people who had all the time in the world. When they finally joined as husband and wife in truth, Clara understood what the poets meant about two becoming one. This was not possession or surrender, but partnership in its most intimate form. Afterward, lying in Luke's arms as snow fell softly outside, Clara felt a peace she'd never known. This was home. Not the house, not the ranch, but this man who'd promised kindness and delivered so much more. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Luke replied, pressing a kiss to her hair. "More than the land, more than anything. You've given me something to fight for beyond acres and cattle." "What's that?" "A future. A real future. With children and grandchildren. With the ranch passed down through generations. With you beside me through all of it." Clara turned in his arms to face him. "Children? If you want them? Only if you want them. But Clara, I can see it. Little girls with your clever eyes, boys with your courage. Teaching them to ride and read, to stand up for what's right. I want that," Clara admitted. "I want all of it. But Luke? Let's get through winter first and whatever else Keen throws at us." Luke's arms tightened around her. "He won't touch you. Won't touch any of what we're building. I promise." It was a promise that would be tested sooner than either expected. 3 days later, Clara woke to the smell of smoke. Luke was already up, pulling on his boots in the pre-dawn darkness. "What is it?" she asked, though dread already curled in her stomach. "Fire. North pasture." Clara was out of bed immediately, pulling on the split skirt Maria had made her for riding. Through the window, she could see an orange glow on the horizon. "Keen?" she asked. "Maybe. Maybe lightning, though there's been no storm." Luke strapped on his gun belt, his face grim. "Stay here with Maria. Keep the shotgun handy." "Luke," he kissed her hard. "I'll be careful. But if this is Keen, if he's escalated to burning pastures, Clara, he might come for the house." "We'll be ready," Clara promised. Luke and the hands rode out toward the fire, leaving Clara and Maria to fortify the house. They filled buckets with water from the pump, loaded all the rifles, positioned themselves at windows with clear sight lines. "Señora," Maria said quietly, "if they come, you run. Take Lady and ride for town. I'm not leaving you. I am old. My life is lived. Yours is just beginning." "Maria." Clara broke off as she spotted riders approaching from the east, the opposite direction from the fire. "Someone's coming." Through the dawn light, she counted 8 riders. Even at a distance, she recognized Keen's distinctive black stallion. "They split up," Clara breathed. "The fire was a distraction." Maria cursed creatively in Spanish. "What do we do?" Clara's mind raced. They couldn't fight 8 men. But they couldn't run either. The house, the ranch records, everything Luke had built was here. "We stall," Clara decided, "and we pray the men see the smoke and realize it's a trap." She stepped onto the porch as Keen and his men rode up, the shotgun obvious in her hands. Maria flanked her, similarly armed. "Mr. Keen," Clara said coolly, "you're trespassing." Keen smiled, the expression cold as winter wind. "Mrs. Harrison, or should I say Miss Whitfield, I've done some checking. Your marriage isn't legal, no proper ceremony, no witnesses, just a bought woman living in sin." "Our marriage was performed by Judge Porter 2 days ago," Clara lied smoothly, "witnessed by Tom Bradley and Samuel Johnson. Would you like to see the certificate?" Keen's smile faltered slightly. "You're lying." "Am I?" Are you willing to bet your freedom on it? Attacking a married woman is a hanging offense in the territory. Attacking an unmarried woman might get you jail. Choose wrong, Mr. Keene, and you'll dance at the end of a rope. One of Keene's men shifted nervously. Boss, maybe we should... Shut up, Keene snarled. Then, to Clara, where's your husband? On his way back, Clara said, with 12 men. They saw through your little diversion, Mr. Keene. The fire's already controlled, and they're riding hard this way. You have maybe 5 minutes before they arrive. It was a bluff, but Clara had learned from watching her father play cards that confidence sold more lies than truth ever could. You're a clever little thing, Keene said. Too clever for a rough rancher like Harrison. What would it take to buy you away from him? I could use a smart woman like you. I'm not for sale, Clara said flatly. Not anymore. Everything's for sale at the right price. Then what's your price, Mr. Keene? What would it take for you to leave the double bar alone? Keene laughed. More than Harrison could ever pay. Try me. The water rights. Just the water rights to Willow Creek. He keeps the land, I get the water. Without water, the land is worthless. Exactly. Clara heard it then, horses approaching fast from the north. Many horses. Either Luke had seen through the trap, or more of Keene's men were coming. Either way, their time was up. Mr. Keene, Clara said loudly, I reject your offer. Furthermore, I'll testify in court about your attempted extortion, your arson, and your threats against my person. Every word you've said has been witnessed. By who? Your Mexican servant? By them, Clara said, as Luke and his men thundered into the yard. But Keene had heard them coming too. He drew his gun, pointing it directly at Clara. Nobody move, or the woman dies. Everything seemed to slow. Clara saw Luke's face transform with rage, saw his hand move toward his gun. But it was Maria who acted first. The older woman's shotgun blast took Keene's hat off and sent his horse rearing. His shot went wide, splintering wood from the porch rail. Clara dropped to the floor as gunfire erupted around her. It was over in seconds. Keene's men, outnumbered and outgunned, threw down their weapons. Keene himself lay in the dirt, clutching his shoulder where Tom's bullet had found its mark, her hair. Luke? What is it? I almost lost you, he said roughly. When I saw Keene pointing that gun at you, Clara, I would have burned the whole ranch to keep you safe. The land means nothing without you. You didn't lose me, Clara soothed, holding him tighter. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? I promise. You're stuck with me, Luke Harrison, through fire and drought and whatever else Montana throws at us. They were married properly a week later, with the whole town in attendance. Even Mrs. Wellington came, though she sat in the back and left early. Judge Porter performed the ceremony, and Clara wore a dress Maria had secretly been making, blue as Luke's eyes, with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. You're beautiful, Luke whispered as she walked toward him. Cut. You're biased, Clara whispered back. Completely, he agreed, and I always will be. The harvest dinner was held the next week, and it seemed the entire territory attended. The attempted burning of the double bar had turned Luke and Clara into local heroes, the honest rancher and his brilliant wife who'd stood up to corruption and won. Clara found herself surrounded by women wanting to know about her education, men asking her advice on legal matters, and everyone wanting to hear the story of how she'd faced down Roland Keene with nothing but words and courage. You've changed things, Mrs. Thomas, the schoolteacher, told her. Shown that women can be more than decoration or drudges. Would you consider teaching some of the girls reading, writing, arithmetic? I'd be honored, Clara said, and meant it. As winter settled over the ranch in earnest, Clara discovered she was pregnant. She told Luke on Christmas morning, watching his face transform from confusion to joy to something approaching awe. A baby? He breathed, his hand hovering over her still flat stomach. Our baby? Due in summer, Maria thinks. July, maybe. Luke pulled her into his lap, holding her like she was made of spun glass. Clara, I never thought. Are you happy? Terrified, Clara admitted. But yes, happy. So happy, Luke. We'll need to add to the house, Luke said, already planning. A nursery, maybe expand the kitchen, and we'll need to hire more help for you, especially when you're teaching. Luke, Clara laughed, we have months to figure all that out. I want everything perfect for you, for both of you. It already is, Clara said, meaning it. This life, this ranch, you. It's more than I ever dreamed possible when I stepped off that train. Luke kissed her tenderly. That reminds me. I have something for you. He produced a small wrapped package from his pocket. Inside was a gold ring, simple but elegant, with a small diamond that caught the morning light. I know we're already married, Luke said, but I wanted you to have this. A real wedding ring, not just the plain band we used for the ceremony. Something that shows that I'm loved, Clara finished. Oh, Luke, it's perfect. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Clara thought about the journey that had brought her here. From Boston's desperation to Montana's promise. From a frightened girl sold to pay debts to a woman who'd found her strength, her voice, her home. I love you, Luke Harrison, she said. I love you too, Clara Harrison, more than all the stars over Montana. Outside, snow began to fall again, blanketing the ranch in pristine white. But inside the house Luke built and Clara made a home, warmth reigned. The fire crackled. Maria sang in the kitchen. And in Clara's womb, new life grew. Promise of a future neither had dared imagine when a scared woman stepped off a train to meet a kind cowboy who'd promised what seemed impossible. He'd promised to be kind. He'd given her the world. Spring came late that year, but when it arrived, it brought abundance. The grass grew thick and green, the cattle thrived, and Clara's pregnancy progressed without complications. She continued teaching the local girls twice a week, turning the front room into a makeshift schoolhouse where young minds bloomed under her patient guidance. Luke watched her sometimes when she didn't know he was looking, his brilliant wife with her gentle hands and fierce heart, teaching girls that they could be more than what the world expected. He'd think about that scared woman at the train station and marvel at the transformation. Not that she'd changed, exactly. All that strength had always been there. She'd just needed space to let it grow. The baby came on a hot July day, with Maria serving as midwife and Luke pacing the hallway like a caged wolf. When the first cry echoed through the house, he burst through the door despite Maria's protests. A son, Clara said weakly, holding a red-faced bundle. Luke, we have a son. Luke approached slowly, as if in a dream. The baby was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a shock of dark hair like his mother's, and when he opened his eyes, they were blue like his father's. What should we call him? Luke asked, touching the baby's impossibly small fist. William, Clara said. After your middle name, William Lucas Harrison. Will, Luke said, testing it. Little Will. As Luke held his son for the first time, looking between the baby and his wife with wonder written across his weathered features, Clara knew their story was far from over. There would be more children, she hoped. More challenges too, droughts and floods, market crashes and conflicts. But there would also be this, a love built on kindness, strengthened by trial and proven by choice. Thank you, Luke said suddenly. For what? Clara asked. For taking a chance on a rough rancher who promised to be kind, for becoming my partner, my wife, the mother of my child, for making this ranch a home and this life worth living. Clara reached up to touch his face, feeling the wetness of tears on his cheeks. Thank you for keeping your promise, for being kind when I expected cruelty, for seeing me as more than merchandise or ornament, for giving me a life I never dared dream of. Partners? Luke asked, though they both knew the answer. Partners, Clara confirmed. Always. As the sun set over the Double Bar Ranch, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Clara reflected on the words her mother had written so long ago. Obey him, no matter how cruel he becomes. But Clara had found something better than obedience, partnership, something stronger than endurance, love. And in Luke Harrison, she'd found the rarest of men, one whose kindness was not weakness but strength, not performance but truth. The girl who'd expected cruelty had found kindness. The woman who'd expected servitude had found equality. And in the vast wilderness of Montana, two souls who'd thought themselves destined for loneliness had found their way home to each other. The summer heat hung heavy over the Double Bar Ranch as little Will took his first steps across the kitchen floor, Maria clapping with delight while Clara held her breath, arms outstretched to catch him if he fell. At 14 months old, their son had his father's determination and his mother's quick mind, already saying words and pointing at everything with endless curiosity. "He's going to be trouble," Luke said from the doorway, grinning as Will tottered toward him with arms raised. "Like his father," Clara teased, watching Luke sweep the boy up into his arms. The sight still made her heart clench, this strong man so gentle with their child. It had been 2 years since Clara stepped off that train, 2 years since Luke's promise of kindness had changed everything. The ranch had prospered, their reputation in town had solidified, and Roland Keene was serving his prison sentence far from Montana. Life had settled into rhythm, calving season, brandings, cattle drives, harvest, punctuated by Will's laughter, and the quiet moments when Luke would pull Clara close and whisper his gratitude for the life they'd built. But peace, Clara had learned, was often temporary on the frontier. The trouble started with a letter that arrived on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday. Clara was teaching her students, her class had grown to 12 girls now, when Tom rode up fast, dust clouding behind his horse. "Mrs. Harrison," he said, hat in hand but urgency in his voice. "Letter came to town for the boss, marked urgent from the territorial office." Clara dismissed her students early, something cold settling in her stomach as she took the official-looking envelope. Luke was out checking the far pastures with Miguel and Carlos, not due back until evening, but something about Tom's expression made her tear it open. The words swam before her eyes, then crystallized into meaning that made her sink into the nearest chair. The railroad was coming through. The proposed route cut directly through the Double Bar's best grazing land, including their water access to Willow Creek. "They can't do this," she breathed. "They can if they got federal backing," Tom said grimly. "Eminent domain, they call it. Government takes what it needs for the greater good." Clara's mind raced. They'd fought so hard for this land, survived Keene's attacks, built something beautiful and lasting. Now the government wanted to tear it apart for steel rails and progress? "Tom, ride out and find Luke. Tell him to come back immediately." "Yes, ma'am." As Tom galloped away, Clara spread the letter on her desk, reading it more carefully. The railroad company was offering compensation, a pittance compared to the land's true value. They had 60 days to respond before condemnation proceedings would begin. "Senora?" Maria appeared in the doorway, Will on her hip. "What is wrong?" Clara explained, watching Maria's face darken with each word. "They cannot take our home," Maria said fiercely. "We fight, yes?" "We fight," Clara agreed, "but this time the enemy isn't a man with a gun. It's progress itself." Luke arrived as the sun was setting, his horse lathered with sweat from the hard ride. Clara met him on the porch with the letter and a glass of whiskey. "How bad?" he asked after reading. "They want the northern quarter, including the creek access. Without water, the rest of the ranch dies." Luke's jaw clenched. "Over my dead body." "That's what I'm afraid of," Clara said softly. "Luke, we can't fight the federal government with guns." "Then how do we fight?" Clara had been thinking about this all afternoon. "With law. With influence. With alternatives." "Clara, I'm a rancher, not a politician." "No, but I'm the woman who exposed Roland Keene's fraud. The woman who teaches half the daughters in this town. We have friends now, Luke. Maybe it's rhyme to call on them." The next morning, they rode to town together, leaving Will with Maria. The council meeting was already in session when they arrived, the small room packed with concerned citizens. Word had spread. The railroad wasn't just threatening the Double Bar. The proposed route would displace 3 other ranches and cut through the town's main street. "Progress," Mayor Davidson was saying as they entered. "We can't stand in the way of progress." "Progress that destroys our homes?" Clara spoke up, and heads turned. "Progress that takes productive ranch land and turns it into steel tracks? How is that progress for Willow Creek?" "Mrs. Harrison," the mayor said condescendingly, "you don't understand the economic benefits. I understand that the railroad company is offering us 30 cents on the dollar for our land value. I understand that they're using federal authority to steal what we've built with our own hands. And I understand that there are alternative routes that don't destroy existing settlements." Alternative routes? This from Judge Porter, who'd remained silent until now. Clara pulled out the maps she'd spent all night preparing. The railroad wants the northern route because it's the shortest path, but if they go 15 miles south through Harmon's Gap, they avoid all settled land. It's only 3 miles longer and actually avoids 2 river crossings. That land's rougher, someone called out. Cost them more to build. Yes, Clara agreed, which is why they want to take our developed land instead. They save money. We lose everything. Is that the kind of progress Willow Creek wants to be known for? Luke stood beside her. My wife's right. We're not against the railroad. Hell, it'll help us get cattle to market faster, but not at the cost of our homes, our water rights, our community. What do you propose? Judge Porter asked. We propose a united front, Clara said. Every affected landowner, the town council, everyone. We present the alternative route as a compromise. The railroad gets their tracks, we keep our homes. And if they refuse, Mayor Davidson asked, then we make it politically expensive for them to proceed, Clara said. I've already written to the territorial governor's wife. She was quite sympathetic when I explained how this would affect the school I run for local girls. Luke's contacted the Cattlemen's Association. We have allies. The room erupted in discussion. Not everyone was convinced. Some saw dollar signs from railroad jobs and increased trade. But by the meeting's end, they'd formed a committee with Clara, surprisingly, elected as secretary. A woman on the committee? Mrs. Wellington protested. She'd become slightly less hostile since Clara had helped her daughter with her arithmetic, but old prejudices died hard. A woman who knows how to read legal documents and expose fraud, Judge Porter said firmly. Unless you'd prefer to handle the paperwork yourself, Mrs. Wellington. The banker's wife subsided, and Clara felt a small thrill of victory. 2 years ago, she'd been property. Now she was defending property, with a voice that others listened to. The next weeks were a whirlwind. Clara wrote letters to every official she could think of, from the territorial governor to senators in Washington. She organized the ranch wives, knowing that their influence, while indirect, was powerful. Men might make the laws, but women often shaped the opinions that drove those laws. Luke, meanwhile, worked with the other ranchers, presenting a united economic front. Together, they represented thousands of acres and hundreds of jobs. The railroad might have federal backing, but territorial officials needed local support to stay in power. It was during this time that Clara realized she was pregnant again. She told Luke one evening as they pored over survey maps, watching his face shift from concentration to shock to joy. Another baby? Clara, are you sure? Very sure. Due in spring, I think. Luke pulled her into his lap, maps crinkling beneath them. You're fighting the railroad while carrying our child? Pioneer women have done more with less, Clara said, though she let herself rest against his chest. But Luke, this fight, it's not just for us anymore. It's for Will, for this new baby, for the future we're building. We'll win, Luke said firmly. We have to. The railroad company sent a representative 3 weeks later, a smooth-talking man named Harrison Blackwood, who wore a suit that cost more than most ranchers made in a year. He came to the double bar directly, apparently thinking he could negotiate with Luke man to man. He hadn't counted on Clara. Mr. Harrison, Blackwood said, deliberately ignoring Clara as she served coffee. Let's be reasonable. The compensation we're offering is generous. It's 30% of the land value, Luke said flatly. Land is only worth what someone will pay for it. Then why not buy Harmon's Gap instead? Clara interjected. It's unoccupied, unclaimed. Surely that would be cheaper than condemning developed land. Blackwood's eye twitched. The route has been decided by engineers who know better than... He paused, his meaning clear. Better than a woman? Clara smiled sweetly. Mr. Blackwood, I may be just a rancher's wife, but I can read a survey map. Your engineers chose the northern route before they even visited the territory. It was decided on paper, in an office somewhere back east by men who've never seen Montana. The decision is final. Is it? Clara pulled out a letter. The territorial governor seems to think otherwise. His wife is very concerned about the impact on local education. Did you know I run the only school for girls in 50 miles? Blackwood's composure cracked slightly. You've been busy. I've been protecting my home. There's a difference. Mrs. Harrison, Blackwood tried a different approach, his tone becoming patronizing. You clearly don't understand the larger economic picture. The railroad will bring prosperity. To whom? Clara interrupted. To Eastern investors who've never set foot here? Or to the families whose lands you're stealing? It's not stealing when the government... It's stealing when you take something worth $1 and pay 30 cents for it, regardless of who's doing the taking. Blackwood stood abruptly. This is pointless. Mr. Harrison, you'll be hearing from our lawyers. And you'll be hearing from ours, Clara said pleasantly. Did I mention my cousin in Boston is a federal judge? He's very interested in this case. Something about railroad companies exceeding their authority. It was a lie. Clara had no such cousin, but Blackwood didn't know that, and the seed of doubt in his eyes was worth the deception. After he left, Luke looked at Clara with admiration. A federal judge cousin? I might have exaggerated. You're becoming quite the poker player, Mrs. Harrison. I learned from watching my father. Before the drinking took him, he was brilliant at reading people, at knowing when to bluff and when to show your cards. What do we do when they call your bluff? Clara's smile was sharp. We make sure we have better cards by then. The letter came from an unexpected source, Luke's younger brother Daniel, whom he hadn't seen in 5 years. Daniel was a lawyer in San Francisco now, and he'd heard about their fight through legal channels. I can help, the letter read. Railroad companies overreach all the time. There are ways to fight them, but you need proper representation. I'm coming to Montana. Luke stared at the letter with a mixture of hope and old pain. He and Daniel had parted badly, fighting over their father's estate after their mother died. You don't have to see him, Clara said gently. We can find another lawyer. No, Luke said slowly. Maybe it's time to mend that fence, and we need all the help we can get. Daniel Harrison arrived 2 weeks later on the very railroad that threatened their land. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. He was younger than Luke by 5 years, with the same blue eyes but a softer face, unmarked by wind and sun. The reunion was awkward, 2 proud men circling each other like wary dogs. It was Will who broke the tension, toddling over to his uncle with arms raised and a trusting smile. Up, the boy demanded. Daniel lifted him, surprise flickering across his features. He looks like you, he told Luke. Has his mother's brains, thank God, Luke replied, and just like that, some of the tension eased. That evening, Daniel spread legal documents across their kitchen table while Maria fed him as if he'd been starving in San Francisco. The railroad's case is actually weak, Daniel explained. Eminent domain requires proving public necessity and paying fair compensation. You can challenge both. How? Clara asked, Will sleeping in her arms. First, we prove the alternative route is viable. I've brought an independent surveyor from California. Second, we demonstrate that the compensation offered is criminally below fair market value. And third, Daniel smiled, we make this politically toxic for them. Meaning? Luke asked. Meaning we turn this into a story about big Eastern companies crushing honest Western farmers. The newspapers will love it. An expectant mother defending her home against corporate greed? You'll have public sympathy from here to New York. Clara felt uncomfortable using her pregnancy as a weapon, but war was war. There's one more thing, Daniel added. I found something interesting in the railroad's original charter. They're required to minimize impact on existing settlements. Choosing a route that destroys 4 ranches when an alternative exists might violate their federal agreement. Hope bloomed in Clara's chest. Could that stop them? It could delay them long enough to make the alternative route more attractive. Time is money for railroads. Every day of delay costs them thousands. They launched their campaign on multiple fronts. Daniel handled the legal challenges, filing injunctions and demands for surveys. Clara organized the public relations battle, writing articles for territorial newspapers about families facing displacement. Luke united the ranchers, presenting an economic argument about the damage to Montana's cattle industry. The surveyor Daniel brought confirmed what Clara had suspected. Harmon's Gap was actually a better route from an engineering standpoint, with gentler grades and fewer water crossings. The only advantage of the northern route was that the land was already cleared and developed. They want to steal our improvements, Luke said bitterly after reading the report. Then we make that theft public, Clara replied. The story hit the newspapers in Helena first, then spread east. Railroad giants target pregnant mother's home wasn't entirely accurate. They were targeting everyone's homes, but it captured attention. Letters of support poured in, and more importantly, letters to politicians. Harrison Blackwood returned a month later, this time with a team of lawyers. They commandeered the town hall for a public meeting that drew everyone for miles. "The Northern Pacific Railroad has been more than generous," Blackwood began. "We're offering compensation above the assessed value." "The assessed value from 10 years ago," Clara interrupted from her seat. "Before improvements, before the town grew, before the land proved its worth." "Mrs. Harrison, you'll have your chance to speak." "I'm speaking now." Clara stood, her pregnancy now visible beneath her dress. "You say you're generous, but you're offering us 30 cents on the dollar. You say this is for progress, but you're choosing to destroy existing settlements instead of building through empty land. Why?" "The engineering requirements have been proven false by an independent surveyor." Daniel stood beside his sister-in-law. "I have here a report showing that Harmon's Gap is actually superior from an engineering standpoint." Blackwood's lawyers whispered frantically among themselves. "Furthermore," Daniel continued, "the railroad's actions violate their federal charter, which requires minimizing impact on existing settlements. We're prepared to take this to federal court." "And to every newspaper in the country," Clara added, "the story of Eastern money crushing Western enterprise will play very well in certain political circles, don't you think?" The crowd murmured agreement. The railroad might have power, but public opinion had its own force. Blackwood stood silently for a long moment. "What do you want?" "Harmon's Gap," Luke said simply. "Build through Harmon's Gap and we'll support the railroad. We'll even provide beef for your workers at fair prices. Fight us, and we'll make this the most expensive mile of track you ever lay. I'll need to consult with my superiors." "You do that," Clara said. "But, Mr. Blackwood, we're not going anywhere. This is our home, our land, our life. We've fought droughts and blizzards and men with guns. Do you really think paperwork will defeat us?" The answer came 2 weeks later. The railroad would build through Harmon's Gap. They would pay the double bar for any land they needed for supply routes, at actual market value. And they would build a station at Willow Creek, ensuring the town's prosperity. The celebration that night rivaled the one after Keene's defeat. The whole town gathered at the double bar, bringing food and music and relief that turned into joy. Clara, exhausted but victorious, watched from the porch as Luke and Daniel talked by the corral, finally reconciling after years of silence. "You did it, mija," Maria said, sitting beside her. "You saved us all." "We did it," Clara corrected. "All of us together." "But you let us." "A woman, leading men to victory. Your mother would not believe." Clara touched the locket at her throat, thinking of her mother's final letter. Obey him no matter how cruel. Instead, she'd found a partner who valued her strength, supported her leadership, celebrated her victories as their own. "My mother lived in a different world," Clara said softly. "I'm helping build a new one." As if summoned by her thoughts, Luke appeared, lifting Will onto his shoulders as he climbed the porch steps. "Daniel's staying another week," he said, "wants to get to know his nephew. And you, properly." "I'm glad," Clara said, meaning it. "Families should be together." Luke sat beside her, his free hand finding hers. "You were magnificent today." Blackwood didn't know what hit him. "I had good teachers," Clara said. "My father showed me how to read people. You taught me how to fight for what matters, and this land taught me that some things are worth any battle." "No regrets?" Luke asked. "About leaving Boston? About the way we started?" Clara looked out over their land, their pastures full of cattle, their fields ready for harvest, their home solid and welcoming. She felt the baby move within her, felt Will's weight against Luke's shoulders, felt the steadiness of Luke's hand in hers. "How can I regret the path that led me here?" she said. "Every hardship, every challenge, they all brought me home. Even being sold by your father? Even that. Because it brought me to you, to this." She gestured at the celebrating crowd, their neighbors and friends and chosen family. "I expected cruelty and found kindness, expected servitude and found partnership, expected to merely survive and instead I'm living." Luke lifted her hand to his lips. "I love you, Clara Harrison." "And I love you, Luke Harrison." Daniel approached then, looking uncertain. "I don't mean to interrupt." "You're not," Clara said warmly. "You're family. Sit." As Daniel settled on the steps, talking about his life in San Francisco, his practice, his hopes to perhaps find a wife as remarkable as his sister-in-law, Clara felt a deep contentment. This was what she'd never dared dream of in those dark days in Boston. Not just love, but belonging, community, purpose. The baby kicked, and she placed Luke's hand over the movement. "Strong one," he murmured. "Like the father," Clara said. "Like the mother," Luke corrected. "God help us if this one's as fierce as you." "You'd be bored otherwise." "True," Luke laughed. "Absolutely true." The party lasted until dawn, and as the sun rose over the Double Bar Ranch, painting the mountains gold and pink, Clara stood with her family on the porch. Will was asleep in Luke's arms, Daniel was helping Maria clear dishes, and the ranch hands were singing Mexican songs as they headed to the bunkhouse. "What now?" Luke asked. "We've defeated claim jumpers and railroad barons. What's next?" "Now we build," Clara said. "We raise our children, we grow the ranch, we help our community thrive. We live the life we fought for." "Together?" "Always together." As they went inside, Clara paused in the doorway, looking back at the land they'd protected. In a few months, train whistles would echo through Harmon's Gap, bringing change to Montana. But the Double Bar would endure, would grow, would pass to Will and his siblings. She thought of that frightened girl at the train station, clutching her mother's letter and expecting cruelty. That girl could never have imagined standing here, victorious and loved, a leader in her community, a partner in every sense. But that girl had found something more powerful than fear. She'd found a man who kept his promise of kindness, a land that demanded her strength, and a love that transformed two lonely souls into something greater than either could be alone. The spring baby came early, a daughter they named Elizabeth after Luke's mother. She had Clara's green eyes and Luke's determined chin, and from her first breath she owned every heart on the ranch. "A daughter," Luke said in wonder, the tiny girl nearly disappearing in his large hands. "Clara, we have a daughter." "Disappointed it's not another son?" Clara asked, though she knew better. "Are you joking? She's perfect. She's going to be just like her mother, brilliant and brave and beautiful." "And stubborn," Clara added with a laugh. "That too. God help the man who tries to tell her what she can't do." As Clara recovered from the birth, she watched Luke with their daughter, saw how gentle he was, how he spoke to her as if she could understand every word. Will was fascinated by his sister, patting her head with sticky hands and declaring, "Baby mine!" "You have to share, little man," Luke told him. "She's all of ours." The railroad's completion brought changes, as they'd known it would. Willow Creek grew from a frontier town to a proper city almost overnight. New businesses opened, new families arrived. The one-room schoolhouse Clara had started in their front room became a real school, with Clara on the board of directors despite protests from some of the newer, more conservative arrivals. "A woman on the school board?" one newcomer blustered at a town meeting. "A woman who started the school in the first place," Judge Porter said firmly. "Mrs. Harrison has more education than most men in this room and has proven her dedication to our children's future." "But it's not proper." Neither was fighting off claim jumpers or facing down railroad barons, but Mrs. Harrison did both, Tom said from the back of the room. "Maybe it's time we stopped worrying about what's proper and started appreciating what works." The matter was settled by vote. Clara remained on the board, becoming its first female secretary. But not all changes were political or economic. The ranch itself was evolving. With the railroad providing easier transport to eastern markets, they could expand their operations. Luke hired more hands, including 2 Chinese workers who'd left railroad construction for the steadier work of ranching. "They're good men," Luke told Clara when some of the other ranchers questioned his decision. "They work hard, don't complain, and Lee knows more about irrigation than anyone I've met." It was Lee who helped them develop a better water system, ensuring that even in dry years, their cattle wouldn't suffer. His partner Chen proved to be a genius with horses, gentling even the wildest Mustangs with patience Clara had never seen. "You collect people," Clara told Luke one evening as they watched their expanded household. Maria teaching Lee to make tortillas while Chen played some sort of board game with Will, baby Elizabeth sleeping in her cradle nearby. "We collect people," Luke corrected. "They come for work but stay because you make them family." It was true. Clara had learned Maria's recipes and taught her Shakespeare in return, She'd helped Chen write letters to his family in China and taught Lee enough English to court the laundry owner's daughter in town. The Double Bar had become more than a ranch. It was a community unto itself, a place where different worlds met and merged. But that very openness would soon be tested. The trouble started when Chen was attacked in town, beaten by men who resented Chinese workers taking American jobs. Luke brought him home bloodied and barely conscious, and Clara tended his wounds with Maria's help. "This isn't right," Clara said furiously as she cleaned a particularly nasty cut. "He's done nothing but work hard and mind his own business." "Some people don't need more reason than different," Maria said darkly. "I have seen this before in Texas and California. Fear makes people cruel." Luke's expression was granite. "Tom, double the men going to town. Nobody goes alone, especially Chen and Lee." "Boss, that might make things worse," Tom warned. "Look like we're picking a fight." "Then we pick a fight," Clara said firmly. "We don't abandon our people." The confrontation came sooner than expected. 3 days later, Clara was in town with Maria and Chen. He'd insisted on returning to work despite his injuries, when they were confronted by a group of men led by Jack Harriman, a recent arrival who'd been stirring up anti-Chinese sentiment. "We don't want your kind here," Harriman said, blocking their path. He looked at Clara with disgust. "And decent white women shouldn't be associating with them." "Decent women associate with decent people," Clara replied coolly, "which explains why we're not associating with you." Harriman's face reddened. "Your husband might be a big man on his ranch, but in town, my husband employs a dozen men who spend their wages at local businesses," Clara interrupted. "Our ranch buys supplies, uses the bank, supports the school. What exactly do you contribute, Mr. Harriman, besides hate and disruption?" "I'm protecting American values." "American values?" Clara laughed, though there was no humor in it. "America was built by immigrants, Mr. Harriman. Irish, German, Mexican, Chinese. We all came here seeking something better. The only difference is when we arrived." A crowd had gathered, including several of the town's established families. Clara saw Mrs. Wellington watching with interest. Since their initial confrontation, the banker's wife had developed a grudging respect for Clara. "Mrs. Harrison is right," Mrs. Wellington said unexpectedly. "This town has prospered through cooperation, not division. If the Double Bar vouches for these men, that's sufficient for me." "And for me," added the general store owner, who profited considerably from the ranch's business. Harriman found himself outnumbered and outmaneuvered. He slinked away with his followers, but Clara knew it wasn't over. Men like him didn't give up easily. That night, she discussed it with Luke and Daniel, who'd extended his stay to help establish legal protections for their workers. "We need to be proactive, Dintimya," Daniel suggested. "Establish legal contracts. Ensure their rights are protected." "And we need allies," Clara added. "The other Chinese workers in town, the Mexican families, even the Irish who faced discrimination before. Separately, we're vulnerable, but together we're Willow Creek," Luke finished. "I like it. But Clara, this could get dangerous. Harriman's type doesn't fight fair." "Neither do we when protecting family," Clara said firmly. They organized quietly at first, creating a network of mutual support among the town's diverse communities. Clara used her position on the school board to ensure all children were welcome, regardless of background. Luke used his economic influence to support businesses that didn't discriminate. Daniel drew up legal documents that protected workers' rights. The system worked well until the night riders came. Clara woke to the sound of horses, many horses, riding hard toward the ranch. Luke was already up, reaching for his rifle. "Stay with the children," he ordered, but Clara was already loading her own weapon. "Maria's with them," she said. "I'm with you." They met the riders in the yard. 20 men in masks, torches creating hellish shadows. Harriman's voice was recognizable despite the fabric over his face. "Harrison, send out the Chinese and we'll leave peacefully." "Go to hell," Luke replied conversationally. "We'll burn you out if we have to." "Try it," Clara called from the porch. "But know this, I've already sent word to the marshal, the governor, and 3 newspaper reporters. Your masks won't hide you from the law." It was partly bluff. She'd sent Tom to town with warnings, but didn't know if help would come. "You're lying," Harriman snarled. "Am I? Can you afford to find out? Every man here will be identified, arrested, tried. Some of you have families, businesses. Is your hate worth losing everything? She recognized some of the horses, knew which masked men were neighbors, even customers. Mr. Peterson, does your wife know you're here? She was just telling me yesterday how grateful she was that her daughter could attend school. And you, Mr. Clark, didn't the double bar just buy 50 head of cattle from you? Is this how you repay fair dealing? Men shifted uncomfortably in their saddles. The mob mentality was fragmenting as individuals remembered their personal stakes. Then came the sound of more horses, lots of them. Judge Porter led a group of armed townsmen, including the sheriff and several prominent ranchers. "Gentlemen," the judge said coldly, "remove those ridiculous masks and go home, or face charges of attempted arson, criminal threatening, and conspiracy." "You can't prove," Harriman began. "I have 30 witnesses who saw you ride through town masked and armed," the sheriff interrupted. "That's conspiracy right there. Add Mrs. Harrison's testimony about your threats, and you're looking at serious time." The mob dissolved like smoke, men pulling off masks and mumbling excuses as they scattered. Harriman was the last to leave, his eyes promising this wasn't over. "Thank you," Luke said to the judge. "Don't thank me. Thank your wife. Her message was very convincing. Plus, she was right. This town's prosperity depends on cooperation, not division." As the crowd dispersed, Clara found Chen and Lee in the barn, armed with pitchforks, ready to defend the home that had welcomed them. "You would have fought for us?" Chen asked, wonder in his voice. "Your family," Clara said simply. "Family fights for each other." Lee said something in Chinese that Chen translated. "He says you have the heart of a warrior in the body of a scholar." "Tell him I had good teachers," Clara replied, thinking of all the battles that had shaped her. Against poverty, against Keene, against the railroad, now against hatred itself. The next morning brought unexpected consequences. Several of the unmasked riders came to the ranch to apologize, shamefaced and genuine. Peterson brought his wife, who tearfully thanked Clara for stopping her husband from doing something irreversibly stupid. "He's not a bad man," Mrs. Peterson said. "Just scared of change, of losing what little we have." "Fear makes us all capable of terrible things," Clara said gently. "The question is whether we let it control us or whether we choose to be better." Harriman left town within the week, but not before trying one last gambit. He filed a complaint with the territorial government claiming the double bar was harboring illegal immigrants and criminals. Daniel handled the legal response brilliantly, but it was Clara who delivered the killing blow. She'd researched Harriman's background and discovered he'd fled Kansas after embezzling from his business partner, a Chinese merchant. "Projection," she told Luke. He hated in others what he was himself, a criminal and a coward. The revelation destroyed any credibility Harriman had left. He slunk away in the night, never to be seen in Willow Creek again. But the incident had lasting effects. The town council, at Clara and Judge Porter's urging, passed ordinances protecting all residents regardless of origin. The double bar's stand had shown that discrimination was bad for business and community both. "You changed things," Daniel told Clara before he finally returned to San Francisco. "Not just for Chen and Lee, but for everyone who's different, who doesn't fit the narrow mold." "Change was coming anyway," Clara said. "I just helped it along." Daniel kissed her cheek, then clasped Luke's hand. "You married well, brother." "I know," Luke said, his arm around Clara. "Best decision I ever made, even if I didn't know it at the time." As summer turned to fall, Clara reflected on how much had changed since she'd stepped off that train 3 years ago. The scared girl who'd expected cruelty had become a force in her community, a protector of the vulnerable, a voice for justice. But more than that, she'd become fully herself, not despite the challenges, but because of them. Each battle had revealed strength she didn't know she possessed, had forged her into someone her mother never could have imagined. The harvest that year was the best they'd ever had. The ranch prospered, the town grew, and Clara's pregnancy, her third, progressed smoothly. This child would be born into a world shaped by its parents' courage, into a community that had learned to value differences rather than fear them. "No regrets?" Luke asked one evening as they sat on the porch, watching Will try to teach Elizabeth to walk while Maria and Chen prepared dinner together in the kitchen. "How could I regret this?" Clara replied, her hand resting on her growing belly. "Every challenge brought us closer to who we're meant to be." Even your father selling you? Clara considered this. Especially that, because it taught me that I wasn't property to be sold, but a person to be valued. And it brought me to you, to this life, to our children. Our children who will grow up in a better world because of you. Because of us, Clara corrected. You gave me the space to become myself, Luke. Your kindness, your faith in me. That changed everything. Luke kissed her softly. You changed everything, Clara. You took a simple ranch and made it a home, took a rough cowboy and made him a better man, took a frightened beginning and made it a love story. As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Clara thought about the journey that had brought them here. From a train platform where she'd expected cruelty to a porch, where she'd found a love deeper than anything she'd imagined possible. The girl who'd clutched her mother's letter, preparing for servitude and survival, had discovered something far greater: partnership, purpose, and a love that transformed not just two people, but an entire community. I love you, Luke Harrison, she said, meaning it with every fiber of her being. And I love you, Clara Harrison. Forever, and then some. The baby kicked, as if in agreement, and Clara laughed. This child would be born into freedom, into choice, into a world where kindness wasn't weakness, but strength, where a woman's voice could shape laws and minds, where love could bridge any divide. This was the life she'd built from a foundation of kindness, the home she'd created from Luke's simple promise at a train station. He'd promised to be kind, and that kindness had changed everything, had given her the safety to grow, the support to lead, the love to thrive. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Clara Harrison sat with her husband on the porch of their ranch, surrounded by the family they'd chosen and built, and knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. The scared girl from Boston had become a pioneer woman of Montana, and in that transformation, she'd found not just survival but triumph, not just acceptance but love, not just a house but a home. The third child came during the worst blizzard Montana had seen in a decade. Snow fell so thick that Clara couldn't see the barn from the kitchen window, and the wind howled like a living thing trying to tear the house apart. Luke had gone to help Tom rescue cattle trapped in a draw when her water broke, leaving her with only Maria and Chen, who'd been snowed in while repairing harnesses. The baby comes now? Maria asked, reading Clara's face with the wisdom of experience. The baby doesn't seem to care about the weather, Clara gasped through a contraction. Maria immediately took charge, sending Chen to boil water and gather clean linens, despite his panicked protests that he knew nothing about childbirth. You know how to follow orders, Maria told him firmly. That is enough. Elizabeth, now 3, clung to Will's hand as he tried to distract her with stories, his 5-year-old voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. Papa will be back soon, he kept saying, though whether he was reassuring his sister or himself, Clara couldn't tell. The labor was hard and fast, unlike her previous 2. Between contractions, Clara worried about Luke out in the storm, about the cattle, about everything except what she should be focused on, bringing this child safely into the world. Stop thinking so much, Maria commanded. The baby needs you here, now, not worried about things you cannot control. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes. Time lost meaning in the rhythm of pain and rest, push and breathe. Chen proved surprisingly helpful, his calm presence and steady hands assisting Maria without question or hesitation. When Clara screamed, he didn't flinch. When she crushed his hand during a particularly brutal contraction, he simply offered the other one. The storm was at its worst when the baby finally arrived. Another son, small but fierce, his cries competing with the wind. Maria wrapped him in warm blankets and placed him in Clara's arms just as they heard horses in the yard. Luke burst through the door moments later, covered in snow and ice, his face wild with worry. Clara, Maria said, the baby. Come meet your son, Clara said weakly, holding up the bundle. Luke crossed the room in 3 strides, shedding snow everywhere, not caring about the mess. He knelt beside the bed, his cold hands infinitely gentle as he touched the baby's face. Another son, he breathed. Clara, he's perfect. You're perfect. God, I should have been here. You were where you needed to be, Clara interrupted. How many cattle did you save? 40 head, maybe more. But Clara, then you did your job and I did mine. That's what partners do. Luke kissed her forehead, then the baby's, then looked at Chen with surprise and gratitude. You helped? Chen nodded, looking embarrassed. Mrs. Harrison, very strong. Maria, very bossy. I just follow orders. Well, you did more than that, Clara said. Thank you, Chen. I couldn't have managed without you. They named the baby Thomas, after Tom, who'd ridden through the blizzard to find Luke when Clara's labor started. The storm lasted 3 more days, trapping them all in the house together. An unusual but not unpleasant situation. Chen taught Will to play Chinese chess, while Maria instructed Elizabeth in the art of making tortillas. Luke barely left Clara's side, as if his presence could make up for his absence during the birth. I've been thinking, he said on the 3rd night, baby Thomas sleeping between them while the wind still raged outside. This ranch, this life, it's bigger than just us now. We need to start planning for the future. What kind of planning? Clara asked, though she suspected she knew. Legal planning. Making sure if something happens to me, you and the children are protected. The ranch stays yours, no questions, no challenges. Clara's chest tightened. Luke, nothing's going to happen. We don't know that. This blizzard reminded me how quick things can go wrong out here. I've already talked to Daniel through letters. He's drawing up papers. Will, trust, everything. You'll be not just my widow, but my legal heir, business partner, everything. Stop talking about dying, Clara said fiercely. You're not allowed to die. Luke smiled softly. I'm not planning on it. But Clara, you know as well as I do that the law doesn't favor women. If I die without proper papers, some distant cousin could challenge your claim to the ranch. I won't let that happen. It was true, and Clara knew it. She'd seen it happen to other widows, years of work stolen by male relatives who'd never set foot on the land they claimed. All right. But Luke, we do it both ways. If something happens to me, nothing will happen to you. We just established we can't know that. If something happens to me, I want documents saying you have full custody of our children, that Maria stays on as their guardian if needed, that our workers are protected. Luke nodded slowly. All right, we plan for everything and hope we never need any of it. When the storm finally broke, the world was transformed into crystalline beauty. Drifts reached the windows in places, and the cattle that survived were scattered across the valley. It took weeks to dig out fully, to account for all the losses, to rebuild what the blizzard had destroyed. But in that struggle, Clara saw something beautiful. The community they'd built coming together. Neighbors helped neighbors regardless of origin or background. The Chinese workers Luke had hired proved invaluable, their experience with difficult conditions serving everyone well. The Mexican vaqueros worked alongside Irish immigrants and German settlers, all united by the common goal of survival. Spring came late but glorious, the snowmelt turning the creek into a torrent and the grasslands into emerald carpet. The ranch had survived the worst winter in memory, and with survival came growth. Luke bought adjoining land from a settler giving up and heading back east, expanding their holdings to nearly 5,000 acres. We're becoming an empire, Clara teased as they rode the new property lines. We're becoming a legacy, Luke corrected, something our children can build on. It was during this expansion that they encountered unexpected resistance. The new land included a section that had been used by a band of Crow Indians for seasonal hunting. Luke discovered this when he found evidence of a recent camp near a spring. We have legal title, Tom pointed out when Luke brought it to his attention. Legal doesn't always mean right, Luke replied, looking troubled. That evening, he discussed it with Clara. The Crow were here first. This spring, this hunting ground, it's been theirs for generations, probably. What do you want to do? Clara asked, though she could see the decision forming in his eyes. I want to find them, talk to them. Work something out. That could be dangerous, Clara pointed out. Relations between settlers and Indians aren't exactly peaceful. Which is exactly why we should try to be different, Luke said. We fought the railroad because they tried to take our land. How is this different? Clara studied her husband's face, seeing the moral struggle there. This was one of the things she loved most about him, his determination to do right even when it was difficult. Then we find them, she said. Together. It took 3 weeks and the help of a trader who spoke Crow to arrange the meeting. Luke and Clara rode out with just Tom and Chen, bringing gifts but no weapons beyond what was needed for basic protection. The Crow band was small, maybe 30 people, led by a chief whose English name was Joseph White Eagle. He was Clara's age, perhaps, with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "You bought the Carson land," he said without preamble. "I did," Luke acknowledged, "but I've learned it has value beyond what I paid for it." White Eagle's eyes narrowed. "You want more money?" "No. I want to make a deal. The spring and the meadow around it. Your people can use it as you always have. Hunt, camp, whatever you need. In exchange, I ask only that you respect our cattle. Help us watch for rustlers if you see them." "You would share the land?" White Eagle seemed suspicious. "It was yours first," Clara said, speaking for the first time. "We're not sharing it so much as not stealing it." White Eagle looked at her with surprise. "The woman speaks wisdom, but other white men will not understand. They will say you are weak, foolish." "Let them," Luke said. "I'd rather be thought foolish than be a thief." They worked out the details over several hours. The Crow would have access to the spring and surrounding 100 acres during their traditional hunting season. In return, they would help watch the borders of the ranch, warning of rustlers or other threats. It was an unusual arrangement, one that would indeed bring criticism. But it also brought unexpected benefits. White Eagle's nephew, a young man named Robert, who'd been educated at a missionary school, proved to have a gift with horses that rivaled Chen's. Luke hired him, causing another stir in town. "First Chinese, now Indians," someone muttered at the general store when Clara was shopping. "What's next? Harrison going to hire freed slaves?" "He already has," Clara said coolly. "Samuel's been with us 2 years now, and he's the best horseman in the territory." "Would you like to complain about that too, or shall we discuss how the Double Bar's diversity has made it the most successful ranch in Montana?" It was true. The combination of different knowledge, Chinese irrigation techniques, Mexican cattle handling, native tracking skills, and traditional American ranching had created something unique and powerful. The Double Bar's cattle were healthier, their losses to weather and predators lower, their profits higher. But success bred resentment, and resentment bred danger. The first sign of trouble was subtle. Fences cut in remote sections, allowing cattle to stray. Then a well was poisoned, killing several horses before they discovered the contamination. Luke increased security, but the attacks continued, always sneaky, always designed to hurt, but not be easily traced. "Someone's trying to bleed us slowly," Tom observed after they found another cut fence. "Question is who," Luke said grimly, "and why now?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Wellington arrived at the ranch one afternoon, her usual composed demeanor cracked with worry. "Clara, I need to speak with you and Luke, privately." They received her in Luke's office, noting her nervous glances and trembling hands. "My husband is not a bad man," she began, which immediately put Clara on alert. "But he's weak, and he's being pressured." "Pressured by whom?" Luke asked. "Eastern investors. They want to buy out the successful ranches, consolidate them into a cattle company they can control from New York. The Double Bar is their primary target." "We're not for sale," Clara said firmly. "They know. That's why they're trying to force you out. Make things difficult enough that you'll be glad to sell." "Your husband is part of this?" Luke's voice was dangerously quiet. "He holds your loan at the bank. They're pressuring him to call it in early, claim some technicality. He's resisted so far, but..." Mrs. Wellington's composure finally cracked. "They're threatening to ruin him if he doesn't cooperate." Clara reached across the desk to take the other woman's hand. "Thank you for warning us. That took courage." "You stood up for me once," Mrs. Wellington said, surprising Clara. "When the other women were gossiping about my marriage, about how Reginald married me for money. You told them that every marriage had its own truth and outsiders shouldn't judge. I never thanked you for that." "You don't need to thank me for basic decency," Clara said. "In this world? Yes, I do." Mrs. Wellington stood. "Be careful. These men, they're not like Keene or even the railroad. They have unlimited resources and no scruples." After she left, Luke and Clara sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the implications. "We need to pay off the bank loan," Luke said finally. "Remove that leverage." "Can we afford it?" "Not easily. We'd have to sell off part of the herd, maybe delay the new barn." "Then we sell and delay," Clara said. "Better than losing everything." They spent the next days liquidating assets, calling in favors, scraping together every dollar they could. Daniel helped from San Francisco, arranging a loan from a bank there with better terms. It was enough, barely. When Luke walked into the Willow Creek Bank with payment in full for his loan, Wellington's relief was visible. "I'm glad you could manage this," he said quietly. "I wouldn't have wanted to." "Well, I know," Luke said. "Your wife's a brave woman, Wellington. You should appreciate her more." The banker had the grace to look ashamed, but paying off the loan was only the first step. The Eastern investors, represented by a smooth-talking man named Cornelius Vanderberg, arrived in town the next week, making it clear they weren't giving up. "Mr. Harrison," Vanderberg said, arriving at the ranch uninvited, "I represent a consortium of investors who see great potential in Montana cattle operations. We're prepared to offer you 3 times what you paid for your land." "Not interested," Luke said flatly. "You haven't heard our whole offer. We'd keep you on as manager, good salary, percentage of profits. You'd still run the ranch, just with our backing." "And your control," Clara added from the doorway. "We've seen what happens when Eastern money controls Western land. The land gets bled dry, the workers get exploited, and when profits drop, you move on to the next opportunity, leaving destruction behind." Vanderberg's smile was cold. "Mrs. Harrison, I've heard about you, the mail-order bride who thinks she's a businesswoman." "The successful businesswoman who happens to have started as a mail-order bride," Clara corrected, "and who recognizes a carpetbagger when she sees one." "Careful, madam. Slander is actionable." "Truth isn't slander, Mr. Vanderberg. Would you like me to detail your consortium's activities in Wyoming? The 3 ranches you bought and destroyed? The families you displaced? I've done my research." Vanderberg's composure cracked slightly. "You can't prove. I can and will, if necessary. The territorial governor is very interested in preventing Montana from becoming another Wyoming. One word from me about your true intentions here, and you'll find every door closed to you. You're making a mistake, both of you. We have resources you can't imagine. We can make your lives very difficult." "You can try," Luke said, standing, "but we've faced down claim jumpers, railroad barons, mobs, and nature itself. You think some soft-handed moneymen from New York scare us?" Vanderberg stood as well, adjusting his expensive suit. "We'll see, Mr. Harrison, we'll see." The pressure began immediately. Suppliers suddenly couldn't fulfill orders. The grain merchant claimed shortages. The railroad developed scheduling difficulties that delayed cattle shipments. Each problem by itself was manageable, but together they created a squeeze that threatened the ranch's operations. "They're trying to strangle us," Tom said after another supplier backed out of a contract. "Then we get creative," Clara said. "Luke, remember what we learned during the railroad fight? We don't fight them where they're strong, we fight them where they're weak." "What do you mean?" Clara smiled, the expression sharp. "They're from the East, used to Eastern ways. They don't understand Montana, don't understand the relationships here. Every supplier they've pressured, we've worked with them for years. They don't want to hurt us. They're being forced, so we give them an alternative." They organized a cooperative, pooling resources with other ranches facing similar pressure. Together, they had enough economic power to guarantee orders, protect suppliers who worked with them. It was Clara's idea to formalize it, creating the Montana Cattle Association with Luke as its first president. "If they want to fight all of us, let them," Clara said at the founding meeting. "But I bet their investors won't like the publicity of Eastern money attacking Western enterprise. The newspapers will love this story." She was right. When the story hit not just local but national papers, helped along by Daniel's connections in San Francisco, the pressure from Vanderberg's consortium suddenly eased. Bad publicity was bad for business, and investors cared more about perception than control. Vanderberg made one last attempt, approaching Clara when she was alone in town with the children. "Mrs. Harrison," he said, blocking her path. "A word." "Step aside," Clara said coldly, her hand moving to the derringer Luke had insisted she carry. "No need for dramatics. I'm simply going to make you a personal offer. Leave your husband, take your children east, and I'll set you up comfortably. Better than comfortable, wealthy." Clara laughed, the sound drawing attention from passers-by. "You think I can be bought? Everyone can be bought." "Then you understand nothing. I wasn't bought by Luke. I was rescued by him. And together we built something you could never understand, a partnership based on respect, love, and shared purpose. Your money is worthless compared to that.